Namaste, viewers, and welcome to another episode of Amazing Vedas with Dr. Pariksit Singh. Thank you, Dr. Singh, for joining us. And viewers, we have been talking about the Vedas and also about a modern rishi who gave us a new Veda, as it were. We are talking about Sri Aurobindo. His birthday is coming up on the 15th of August. And Sri Aurobindo, of course, gave us a new way to understand the Veda. We had lost touch, more or less, with the Vedic world, with the Vedic vision, with the great wisdom that was embodied in the Vedas, but which was a perennially flowing stream, in our culture. And Sri Aurobindo reconnected us. And we had sort of lost our connection for a variety of reasons. One reason was that Shankarite attributed to Shankara, but maybe, it resulted because of a variety of circumstances, which is the disassociation of sensibility, so to speak, the Karma
Yes.
Kanda and the Jnana Kanda. And people said, oh, leave the mantras to the priests or to the sacrificers, to the Mimamsakas, and let's just talk about the more accessible part of the Veda, which is, of course, the Upanishads. So that was one split. And then later, when Sayanacharya came and he gave us a word-by-word commentary, perhaps there was another split because the Islamic invasions had already happened and we had, ceased to be, should I say, worshippers in the Vedic tradition. We had completely enshrined Murti Puja. So when the West came, we got into a tizzy trying to defend what Murti Puja was, and we were almost compelled to go back to an Abrahamic kind of monotheism or a justification of our tradition, which both Dayanand Saraswati did, but prior to him, the great Ram Mohan Roy did, congregational worship, no image, and some sort of hymns, the hymns to music, which are so different from the powerful mantras of the Vedas. And it's only because of Sri Ramakrishna and Vivekananda that somehow we turned back in the right direction. And of course, Sri Aurobindo reconnected us to the Veda, to the Shruti, but of course, talked about the future poetry, which would again be mantric. And today we're going to talk a little more about the future poetry. So, Dr. Singh, I want to, with your permission, tell you about, an anecdote or a, interesting experience regarding the future poetry, if
Yes,
that
sir.
interests you.
I'm all ears.
And it concerns somebody you probably know, Dr. Kiri Joshi.
Yes, I've read him. He was a great educationist, if I remember correctly.
Oh, he was a great educationist. He was also the head of the Sri Aurobindo International Center of Education in Pondicherry. He came from Gujarat. He also had a traditional background as from a family which was steeped in the ancient traditions of India. But he was completely, under the spell of Sri Aurobindo and the mother. And then after he left the ashram, and he was also close to Satpre, he left the ashram, and then our current Prime Minister, Sri Narendra Modi, when he became the Chief Minister of Gujarat, he brought back Kirit Bhai and asked him to make the educational map of the future of Gujarat state. And later, Kirit Bhai was brought to the center and he became the chairman of ICPR, Indian Council of Philosophical Research. And then he gave lots of lectures on Sri Aurobindo and the mother, organized lots of conferences, and I knew him personally. But here's the anecdote. So, Kirit Bhai, he did not have a family. He died as a single person, as a bachelor, if you will. And he donated a lot of his money to some trusts which would continue the work. And one of the trustees of this trust, under the direction of Kirit Bhai, called me up. I was a professor at JNU. And he said, Makarand, I want you to do a project on the future poetry. So I was all ears. And I said, yeah, sure. What would you like me to do? So he said, you hire a few students and you do the entire referencing, in the future poetry. So I said, what do you mean referencing? So he said that What Sri Aurobindo does is before he comes to the future, he goes to the past and he does a survey of English poetry. Now, this is extraordinary. As a professor of English, I can tell you that, very few Indian critics have contributed to, a fresh understanding of English poetry or American poetry. Because we follow in the grooves, of the masters, his master's voice. You remember the HMV.
Yes.
And Udhar, I'm sorry to say this, but वो his master's voice में वो जो चिन्ह है, उनका जो सिंबल है एक कुत्ता होता है. तो
Yes.
उसमें ये दिखाना चाहते हैं कि ये हाई फाइडेलिटी रिकॉर्डिंग जो थी, जो ग्रामोफोन रिकॉर्ड, वो मास्टर्स की आवाज उसमें कैप्चर करता है. तो कुत्ते को समझ में नहीं आता है कि मास्टर बोल रहा है सचमुच या उसकी वॉइस की रिकॉर्डिंग बोल रही है. तो मेगाफोन दिखाया है और उसमें कुत्ते का चिन्ह है. आई एम टॉकिंग अबाउट एन ओल्ड यू नो their old logo of HMV records.
Yes.
Anyhow, so this is what we were. But Sri Aurobindo gave an original interpretation of English poetry,
Yes.
talking about, the vital, with Chaucer, the mental, the intellectual, and, the romantic poets, some touch of the psychic, spiritual. So he had a framework, as we know. And then he
Yes.
tried to, see the entire evolution of English poetry from his own framework. And he also talks about Indic poetry there, as you know. So it's an extraordinary contribution. So when I used to teach, I've taught Sri Aurobindo in JNU, which was itself an act of heresy. I've taught Sri Aurobindo, Gandhi, Sarojini Naidu, all these people in JNU. Anyhow, so I picked up this project and I got a research assistant or two to try to trace all the references. In other words, Sri Aurobindo would quote poetry without tell you which poem it was.
Yes.
And of course, then Kirit Bhai also passed on and he became a bit old and that project fell through. In fact, the promised funding also didn't come. So I had to scramble to pay all these people from other sources. But it was very educative. And today, just yesterday, I was thinking about our podcast today, and this whole insight into the future poetry came to me. And luckily now, AI can trace all the references for us because
Yes.
the lines can be quoted, and this is from the prelude or this is
Yeah.
from Byron's, this poem or that poem. Because
Right.
not all of us have that memory that we can recognize lines instantly, right? But because of AI, that one job that Kirit Bhai wanted us to do can be
Right.
done very easily. But the
Yeah.
deeper engagement with the future poetry is so important in my view because Sri Aurobindo, in his attempts to bring back the mantric and using the English language, okay,
Yes.
today we want to get rid of English in India, which to me is not a good idea because it's like throwing the baby with the bath water. My own teacher, Professor Braj B. Kachru, used to tell me that when English came to India, it became Dvaja. It became
Twice born.
twice born. So I said, what do you mean? He said, what do you mean? We put the Yagnopavit on English. Usko purify kar diya. As a metaphor. We consecrated it. We made these people read the ancient wisdom and new English was created, which
That
another professor of English, Srinivas Aravamudam, has called Guru English. A new register was created. So English is a kind of universal language as Sanskrit was at one time. And today, thanks to Google and others, and no thanks to anybody in India, we have tremendous translation abilities. We can read the Veda, we can read the Upanishads, we have many tools, without spending 12 years to learn Sanskrit. We have many tools to understand the language. So, one of the great contributions of Sri Aurobindo is, he invented new meters for English, like quantitative meter.
yes.
So, last time you asked me to read a poem. So, I have chosen a poem. If you like, I can read
Yes.
it.
Please. Yes. I
And
would love to hear it.
then I will turn it back to you to analyze it in the next
Yes.
episode. Okay. So this poem, friends, is from the Future Poetry, and it appears in an appendix on quantitative meters. And if I remember right, the poem was actually written in 1942. So Sri Aurobindo, in his last years, his eyesight was getting weaker, which also meant that though he could write, he had to have other people to read out his own writings to him. So once again, the composition became oral. And like a drashta, we have talked about it, he could see, it would appear to me, these lines. And to me, it's such a fabulous poem because it sums up the entire journey of a spiritual aspirant. But we'll talk more about it. So, this is what Sri Aurobindo says: free quantitative verse with a predominant tactilic movement. So, maybe Dr. Singh, you could just tell our viewers what a dactyl is, because everyone knows what an iamb is. But maybe
I
you could.
am that I am. I am that I am. But dactyl is first foot. There are three feet to the three sounds that hit you, and it's strong and then short, short. So long, short, short. And I studied this. I went into the background of this. There are poets who say dactyl cannot be used in English, but Sri Aurobindo brought that dactylic movement into English poetry. So I would love to hear what you have. I'm all ears for this, because if you can catch it, it's a very unique sound in English. So
Exactly. It's so
yeah,
interesting when
yeah,
we talk about these rhythms that, another so called discarded poet,
yes,
Sarojini Naidu, she was
yes,
also experimenting,
yes,
partly with dactyls and anapests. So we'll
Annabelle,
talk about it in one of our other
yes,
parallel series, which we hope to resume. But now,
yes,
with your permission and
yes.
invoking Sri Aurobindo, let's look at this beautiful poem of his called Ascent. The
Ascent.
poem
I
is in
love.
two parts. Let me
Yes,
start with the first part. It's called The Silence. Into the silence, arise, O spirit immortal, away from the turning wheel, breaking the magic circle. Ascend single and deathless. Care no more for the whispers and the shoutings in the darkness. Pass from the sphere of the grey and the little, leaving the cry and the struggle, into the silence forever. Vast, immobile, formless, and marvelous, higher than heaven, wider than the universe, in a pure glory of being, in a bright stillness of self-seeing, communing with a boundlessness, voiceless and intimate. Make thy knowledge too high for thought, thy joy too deep for emotion, at rest in the unchanging light, mute with the wordless self-vision. Spirit, pass out of thyself. Soul, escape from the clutch of nature. All thou hast seen cast from thee, O witness. Turn to the alone and the absolute. Turn to the eternal. Be only eternity, peace and silence. O world transcending, nameless oneness, spirit immortal. So, this is the first part. So, let me get your comments on this, Dr. Singh, and then we will go to our final episode of today for the next part.
I have to confess to you, I never. This was never my favorite. This is one poem that always gave me a hard time, because I always used to read it and say, what is it that you're talking about? And now today that I'm hearing it, it is bringing a different sense to me than it did, say, 40 years ago. And as I shared with you, the life heavens, I suggest the 4 lines that I absolutely loved. But here there's a different thing you're doing, and it's hitting you hard, long, short, short, long, short, short, long, short, short. But also, he's talking about an experience that is a very powerful, what you would call it, a Vedantic experience, which those of us who are also aspiring yogis and people who do dhyana can relate to as a true experience. And not only that, if we listen to it, we start feeling. So it's not just a dactyl, it's also a tactile experience. We can start feeling that and touching that somehow. And that is, I think, the genius. The sound makes that experience come alive. And I'm just going to, the lines that really hit me was, it's a very strange statement. Spirit, pass out of thyself. I just, normally when we think of Atman, the whole world is full of Atman, right? And as the Vedantic experiences, Enedam Puritam Sarvam Atmanevatman Atmani, everything is filled with Atman. Now he's telling you to pass out of yourself. It's a very interesting. All thou hast seen cast from thee, O witness. That is a very powerful realization, this the experience. Turn to the alone in the absolute, turn to the eternal, as if he's taking a hammer and hitting is on our heads. Do this, like not just a poet, but a spiritual teacher. Be only eternity. What a powerful phrase. Be only eternity. Peace and silence. O world transcending nameless oneness. Spirit immortal. This is an amazing poem, and I think I'll have to go back and spend a lot more time and just let it vibrate through the neurons, through the bones, through the marrow, and experience it fully. And that is the power of the mantra. You experience it, you understand it mentally, but that's only the Vaikari. But then you start absorbing it sensually, you start feeling it. As the haiku poet says, you roll it on your tongue 1,000 times, and then somewhere the sound becomes the experience. And that is the genius of perhaps the mantra. If you let it go deep in your marrow, that experience becomes you, and that experience manifests itself to you, probably like a spota. And I think I just, for a moment, I felt almost as if he had done that to me, and we'll have to go back. And that is the joy of Vedantic poetry. You can spend your whole life on it, and it's not a meaning that is important, because that is important, but that's only 1/4 of the poem. The rest is perception, the rest is experience, the rest is absorption, and the rest is realization. So I absolutely, what a gorgeous poem.
Oh, well, thank you, Dr. Singh. Viewers, if you want to hear the rest of the poem, and if you want to hear our views, our thoughts, and our decoding, as it were, of the poem, because what Sri Aurobindo, in fact, I checked after we spoke, Dr. Singh, that he did say that the Upanishad is not just a teacher and disciple sitting close to each other and learning about wisdom, but it is actually going into the hidden meaning of things.
Yeah.
So, viewers, if you want to join in to this conversation, please tune in once again to the Amazing Vedas podcast, or the vodcast, our next episode. Do follow us on X, our platform X, and do check out Dr. Singh's book, The Veda Made Simple, and his new book, Veda for Gen Z. We are going to talk about Gen Z and not cockroaches, but real sadhaks. So please like, share, and subscribe to our channel, and
Yes.
bathe in this divine flow of energy, and pranic, uplifting, you might say, a Tirtha, that is the Veda and
Yeah.
the modern Veda of Sri Aurobindo. So with those words, thank you and see you soon. Namaste.